Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second monologue in the Conservation Bullshit series. For those who are new to this channel, this is a series I'm using to just point out some of the prejudices and injustices that hide under the guise, in plain sight, under the guise of conservation and concern for nature. Today, I'm talking about love. Love is a good thing that people search for, but in conservation, it's a different thing. Love in conservation is expression of neurosis. And this is what I mean. The neurosis that made Westerners feel they want to possess Africa as a whole, or little bits of it, or little aspects of it. That's where this so-called love comes from. And it's a gradient, if you think about it, or from my observations in my career. There are people say love Africa. Whenever I hear that, I have very exacting standards of the intellect of people I talk to. When someone says they love Africa, I quickly move away to look for someone more intelligent. You can't love Africa. Africa is huge, it's diverse, it doesn't love you back. You can be fascinated with it, you can be interested in it, you can have wonderful experiences in it, but you can't love it. What do you mean you love it? You cannot insult Africa in that way, in diminishing it into something, this small thing you can love like a puppy. Um, it grows worse. The neurosis is worse and worse as the object of love shrinks. So from there you come to people who love a country. I love Kenya, I love Tanzania, I love this. And I'm talking about outsiders, particularly Westerners. This is an illness that I've not observed in people other than Westerners. So I love this country. What do you mean? This country is so complicated, and it's so complicated, diverse, etc. You can't diminish it into this small package. Again, it's very insulting, and it's a show of prejudice, that people don't realize. It's because it's an absurdity that's been so normalized. Then you get to the level of, I love this place, I love Tsavo National Park, or I love Masai Mara National Reserve, or I love Serengeti, or I love Kruger. What do you mean? Kruger is, or Serengeti, or whatever, is this huge place with millions of plants and birds and animals and insects and all that. What part of that? What part of that do you love or can love you back? Again, it's now gone from the desire to diminish to the desire to acquire, desire for ownership. So in this man or woman's mind, if they had all the power, if their dream could come true, they would own Serengeti, they would own Tsavo or Masai Mara. It would be theirs if they could possibly achieve that. Coming further down, now we get to the level of species, and this is where I noticed it in my career. Someone comes and says, I love elephants. How did, of all the thousands of species of mammals that are there in Africa, how did you decide you love elephants? Or why? How did you isolate them? Why did you isolate them out of these? Because they don't exist in isolation. There's trees that they scratch themselves on, there's trees that they eat, there's water that they drink. How will you love them out of all these things? You pick this one object of this illness or love that you're talking about. So that's the point at which it got worrying, particularly for me as an individual, when I dealt with these people. And I saw it get even worse when you get to a point when someone loves a particular individual animal or even names it. When you deal, and many of these people style themselves as scientists. When you deal with scientists who have named animals, you are dealing with very prejudiced people. And I defy anyone to name a scientist who names wild animals, individual names, James, John, Peter, Mary, whatever, and is not prejudiced and is not desirous of acquiring those animals. This this is a problem because these people want to acquire, they tend to acquire in some shape or form these animals and start controlling the narrative around them. And for a scientist, I know scientists have to, because of part of ecological research, you have to mark individual animals in whatever way. But when you can mark it number N115, N116, O255, and those kind of things, you can number them for scientific purposes. But you find them named Craig, they're named this, they're named that. The late Jane Goodall had a whole plethora of named chimpanzees with their daughters and sons and grandchildren and these kind of things. No, that's neurosis. That's neurosis. And the the reason why the reason why we need to be careful of this, because this is acquisition happening in plain sight. Suddenly, Fifi, a chimpanzee, without being expressed anywhere or documentary or whatever, or documentary evidence, belongs to somebody. And we can't deny that. We can't deny that. No one else has a chance to, if you wanted to do research, has a chance to do research on that chimpanzee because it belongs to us. So if those of you who read the news, you may remember a few years ago there was a lion called Cecil that was killed by an American poacher in Zimbabwe. I've never heard him referred to as a poacher. They call him illegal hunter, they call him unlicensed hunter and all that because he was white. But Dr. Walter Palmer from Minnesota, I think, yeah, he was a poacher. So he killed the lion. And there was this huge ruckus. And other Africans were wondering, like, what's this? Not the first lion to be killed in Africa. Um, Secondly, there is rarely any uproar if a wild animal is killed by a white person in Africa. They are allowed to do so by their whiteness. But apparently, this Cecil was a lion owned by Oxford Wildlife Conservation Research Unit or Oxford Wild Crew. They had collared it. And it was one of their study animals, and they were behind the ruckus. And worst of all, the name Cecil was drawn from Cecil Rhodes, that racist imperialist who Rhodesia was named after. It's not these are not coincidences. But that's why there was such a ruckus. And after the uproar after that killing, they started a fundraising drive online and raised millions of pounds out of the death of that one lion. And the millions of pounds were not given to conservation authorities in Zimbabwe. The millions of pounds were given to Oxford Wild Crew in England. And this is a perfect snapshot of the neurosis or the bullshit of loving wildlife, and the need to acquire it in some way or another. So we need to think closely about this. We certainly, client states like Kenya that blindly follow some of these leads and always fall victim to this. A short while ago, Kenya Wildlife Service started some strange program of wanting people to pay money to name wild animals. That's a scam. And the reason they were doing it is because conservation organizations had been making money from it. Um, the elephant researchers get money from donors or tourists to name or adopt animals. They still do it now. It's a huge scam because the same animal gets adopted by 50 different people, each giving it a different name and giving money. It's a huge scam. So rather than put a stop to it, as is normal of Kenyan wildlife authorities, we try and do it. We also try and get in on the scam. Well, it didn't work because they had all sorts of funny plans of you name a hyena, it costs this, name an elephant, it costs this, and all that. And it's all rubbish. Now, the reverence that African people have for wildlife can be seen in our traditions. You will find in Luo society, where I come from, there'll be someone called Sibuor, which is a lion. You go to Kikuyu society, there'll be someone called Muruthi, which is also a lion. You go to other societies, you find someone called Mbiti, which is hyena. You'll find someone called Liech, which is an elephant, or Ndlovu, and you find all these people. You find someone called Joey, find someone called Quach. You find all these names taken from wild animals that are revered for one reason or another. This is reverence. I've yet to meet a Westerner called James Elephant, or James Deer, or James Bison, or James Bear. Actually, in the Native American societies, you do find them using those names, Big Bear, or whatever animals they have there, because of that reverence. Settler colonial societies are after acquisition and possession. So their professed love, or the love professed by their forebears, those who came earlier than where we are today, is not from a place of, it's not from a good place. It's from a very bad place. It's from a poisonous place. And we should be doing away with it now. We should, least of all, we should not be seeking to replicate it, admire it, or uphold it in any way, because at very best it's childish. And I've said this before, you'd be amazed at how much of conservation is run by childish interests. I've worked on conservation programs where some billionaire gave some money for conservation of cheetah, and he did not want any of the money to be used to do any research on gazelles. So I wondered, does he think cheetahs are eating Whiskas cat food? Or what does he think cheetahs are eating? And you see these billionaires, who tend to be very childish people, they keep giving money for conservation of one thing or one place in isolation. And it is not out of a desire to improve anything. It's about a desire to acquire and express power and sort of actualize pretty childish dreams that they had earlier. Now, once we learn to move away from this, we will realize how harmful some of these international conservation structures are. Like one of the biggest hindrances to logic in conservation today is the IUCN. We work with IUCN's definition of parks, and their definition, you can look it up online. Their definition has a line that justifies extrajudicial means of conservation. Their stand is an external one. They dictate what is endangered or what is not endangered, or least concern. It doesn't matter what you, the people who live with them, think about them. They dictate where people meet, when people meet to discuss conservation, from their headquarters in Gland in Switzerland. And it's a colonial outfit. It's a colonial outfit. And how supposedly sovereign nations bow down to it is something that sociologists really need to study. There is no international organization on let's say foodstuffs that dictates when we meet and what we should eat and what we should not eat and how we should cook it and all this. People say, go to hell, we'll eat what we like. But in conservation, one organization can do that. No one dictates how we drive, the beds we sleep on, the sports we play or do not play, the languages we speak. But how do we have one organization, some small group of people somewhere in Switzerland, dictating to us how we conserve the heritage that belongs to us, that cannot be moved from our countries? The absurdity of that needs to come home to us. And when we remove the aspect of love from conservation, then we will see how absurd those things are. Because there's a huge number of people right now who think that IUCN and these other interests are working out of love for wildlife. Or worse still, when you're really sick, you think they're working out of love for us, the people who live in the countries where this wildlife is. So we need to understand that for what it is. And let's look at what we have around us. Let's value what we have around us. Let's conserve what we have around us. Let us place love where it should be in our society and not place it where it shouldn't be. Because right now we live in a place where if an African like myself, I've often gotten angry at these people who want to promote sport hunting by Westerners in African countries, and I've called that colonialism. People like Safari Club International and all that, and they say, "Why are you getting emotional? You're emotional." I mean, in conservation, when you are black, if you get angry, you are irrational and emotional. When you are white, you're wonderful because you love wildlife. That's as simple as it is. And the most bloodthirsty hunter, if he's a Westerner like Roosevelt and these others, get celebrated as people who love wildlife. George Adamson, celebrated as someone who loved wildlife. Jim Corbett, celebrated as someone who loved wildlife. John Frederick Selous, we even have a huge reserve in Tanzania, a beautiful place named after him. He's a bloodthirsty hunter, but he's celebrated as someone who loved wildlife. This is the rationality of love in the conservation sector. Love in conservation is bullshit. And remember that. Worse still, it covers for a lot of prejudice. So let's wake up for that. Let's wake up to that. And the next one is coming soon. Good day.